Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests from the UK and Slovenia, and welcome to our second Future Perfect event, which is organized by the British Embassy in Slovenia and the British Slovenian Chamber of Commerce. Today, we will be discussing green finance, and we have some great speakers here from the UK and Slovenia. But first, this event would not have been possible without our partners. So thank you to the British Embassy in Slovenia, to the Department of International Trade, and our members, Trimo, Geoplin, and NLB. Prime Minister Boris Johnson pledged that 2020 would be the defining year of climate action, as he announced that the UK will be hosting the next UN Climate Change Conference in 2021. And it is my pleasure this morning to first announce the British Ambassador to Slovenia, Ms. Tiffany Sadler, to tell us more about that. Good morning, Tiffany. Can you please unmute yourself?
Thank you, Barbara, and thank you for bearing with me, colleagues, while I unmuted myself. So I was saying dobro jutro and dobrodošli, which is my first message today. Welcome to everyone who has joined this event. As Barbara mentioned, it's the second in our series of Future Perfect. So Future Perfect is the Embassy's plan to encourage everyone to think about the big issues post-COVID. And last week we had an excellent session where we talked about COVID versus COP, and we talked about the challenges of climate change and the challenges of responding to COVID, the ways that they can be seen to conflict with each other, but also can mutually reinforce each other. And that was not only the first in our Future Perfect series, but also launched the Embassy's year of climate action, building, as Barbara mentioned, towards COP in Glasgow next year. And this week, we turn to the important topic of green finance. So green finance for me is an extremely important agenda. It can sometimes seem slightly technical. So I thought I might talk a little bit about what green finance is to me and why I think it's so important before handing on to our illustrious speakers. So what is green finance and why is it so important? Well, I think it can sometimes seem technical, but the heart of it for me is a couple of important partnerships. And the first of those is the partnerships between public sector and private sector. I think it's absolutely right that today that the British Embassy chairs this with the Chamber of Commerce, because there is this sense that public sector and private sector need to work together on green finance. And it's great to see so many of you here from the private sector and from businesses joining us. Barbara also mentioned that today, the Prime Minister in the UK has announced a new 10-point plan to launch what he is calling a green industrial revolution in the UK. And at the heart of that plan is this public-private sector partnership. So the Prime Minister talked about a new 12 billion of money that we are putting into addressing climate change and to launching the green industrial revolution in the UK. But that's just 12 billion of public money. And the most important thing is that that public money will spur investment from the private sector. And that comes back to that theme of green finance and public-private partnership that we're talking about today. Our Prime Minister was also very clear that that green industrial revolution will unleash economic opportunity and also will create a lot of jobs. So in the UK context, he's talking about 250,000 new jobs coming from this green industrial revolution. And again, those are just direct jobs, but we foresee this unleashing of economic opportunity to actually create a lot of other jobs in other sectors as well. So that's the public-private partnership that I think is at the heart of green finance. But the other important partnership is between countries. And on this, I think it's great that we are working together, the UK and Slovenia, on this agenda. because climate change is such an international challenge, and that's because we all feel the effects, whether that's in flooding or rising sea levels in the UK, or whether it's on glaciers melting here in Slovenia or forests dying back. So we all feel the effects, but also it's an international partnership because we can work together as countries and we can learn from each other across the full range of policy agendas. And I certainly see green finance as being one of those areas where we can learn from Slovenia in the UK, and the UK and Slovenia can learn from the UK. So I want to hand over in a moment to the first of our very illustrious speakers, who is Sir Roger Gifford. And Sir Roger was at the leading forefront of the Green Horizon Summit, which was in the UK last week. He is a leading light, indeed chair of the Green Finance Institute, and we're very grateful to have him here. But as I say, we can also learn from Slovenia on this agenda, and I'm delighted and honoured that we have Finance Minister Šircelj here to speak to us as well. This is definitely an area when we can learn from each other, and I'm very much looking forward to what he has to say. One of the areas that the Prime Minister announced as our Green Industrial Revolution today is around a new date for phasing out diesel and petrol car engines. So the new date for us on the UK is 2030. And I know that the Finance Ministry and across government, you have been thinking about zero emission vehicles here in Slovenia as well. Another area where we can learn from and work together, I think, is around other zero emission vehicles. So there's often a focus on cars, but we also need to reduce emissions from planes and from boats. That was one of the areas in the Prime Minister's 10-point plan, which he is announcing today, additional research into zero-emission boats and zero-emission planes. And that's another area where I know Slovenia is absolutely at the forefront of activity. So I shall end as I started by saying dobrodošli, welcome, and I look forward very much to hearing what the speakers have to say, and also to you in the audience for your questions. And thank you. Back to you, Barbara.
Thank you very much, Madam Ambassador. And it is with great pleasure that I introduced our keynote speaker this morning, who is Sir Roger Gifford, a chair of the Green Finance Institute and senior banker at SEB Bank. Good morning, Sir Roger Gifford. Let's introduce green finance. Would you be kind enough to tell us what distinguishes green finance from the rest of the financial intermediation, and where do we stand today?
Well, good morning, Ambassador, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning from rural England, where the internet is poor today. So if Barbara holds up her hand, I'm going to switch off my video, but it's very good to be with you, very good to see you. Thank you so much for inviting me to speak. And even in a year which has been dominated by this disabling pandemic, and in the lead up to COP26 next year in Glasgow, we can see that the revolution in understanding and using climate finance is continuing. Actually, it feels like it's accelerating. And the Green Horizon Summit that we held in London last week really reinforced that, with almost 10 million tweets and 300,000 live stream views. We can talk about that later. And this year we're seeing higher green bond issuance than ever before. In the UK, the phrase that we're using about the future is building back better. And it has a very strong post-COVID feeling to take advantage of the reset that we're seeing, that the need for regenerating along better lines. Implicitly, cleaner, healthier, greener. And as you heard, our Prime Minister just this morning announced his 10-point plan, encouraging green growth and jobs all over the country. So to answer the exam question set by the organisers, how can green finance affect future climate change? And one answer is clearly by investing in new green technologies. And what the Prime Minister is tacitly acknowledging is that this is a technical story, because the climate crisis is a technical failure. And as many countries, especially in Asia, not just China, have grown rapidly post-war, and especially in the last 50 to 60 years, so clean energy has failed to keep up with their ambitions. Nuclear power outside of very few countries has failed to deliver, and renewables have only recently come on the scene. In fact, the only viable energy source around the globe has been fossil until very recently, and we have all benefited economically from it. Let's not beat about the bush. So fossil fuel energy sources have doubled since 1980, alongside prodigious growth in many countries since that same time, particularly in Asia, which makes the technology of renewables and their potential very interesting, already showing growth patterns identical to those seen in earlier product revolutions. New energy technologies are now seen to be superior to fossil. So even in the absence of a climate crisis, you could argue that markets would be driving the expansion of these technologies and pushing down prices at the same time. It's already happening. In solar, in wind, battery, hydrogen may be coming, carbon capture, all against fossil and carbon-intensive technologies. Typically, product revolutions need a 30-year incubation period, followed by a 30-year period of disruption and another 30 years of stabilization. The first 30 years of incubation see that technology developed a bit below the radar until cost or efficiency parity is reached. The incubation period is then followed by a period of exploding volumes, unit price declines, and soaring profits for the new monopolies. Think of IT today. It is the case with IT, with chips, with processors, with mass production technologies, the first wave of electrification, even cars and steam engines. It's a very similar story with a similar timeline. Then there's often a period of stabilization which sees much increased regulation to make sure that the gains are passed on to customers and the usual excesses of capitalist innovation are tempered and taxed. And I suggest we're just entering that third period now with IT. With renewable energy, we're approaching the second phase of disruption with the usual business and political challenges that encompasses. Many in the existing fossil industries resisting the change that is coming. And the key is this for finance, that buying into better technologies on a falling cost curve and leading the way, putting those factors into your business has always been a driver of long-term competitive advantage. Think horses versus tractors. Think fax machines versus email. It's the same story. And no one understands this overall situation better than China, who has been the world's largest manufacturer of solar panels since 2008, and since 2011 has produced the majority of global photovoltaics on an annualized basis. It's estimated that by the end of 2017, China had enough manufacturing capacity to produce 51 gigawatts of PV modules per year, 51 gigawatts, an amount twice as large as 2010's global production of 24 gigawatts. They're a leader in wind power too. So the technology is a very interesting angle. Of course, China is not alone. The UK is well represented in both research and development, and so I understand is Slovenia in some areas. So we also see significant investment in hydrogen energy development in the UK, in Japan and Germany and elsewhere, and many other countries now investing heavily in renewable technologies. And the main point is this, that the environmental movement is moving away from environmentalists towards business and commerce and finance, because they can see the commercial opportunity of investing in this new technology. And that's really, for me, what green finance is all about. It's good finance, normal finance, but with that specific green cause underneath, which is also linked through to new technologies. I think there's one other area I'd like to mention, which is set to make a difference, and that's addressing biodiversity loss. And in the UK, we have a review out shortly on the economics of biodiversity loss by Professor Partha Dasgupta of Cambridge University, setting out a framework for an economics that reflects that we're all embedded in the biosphere. It's about understanding biodiversity loss as an asset management challenge, as an asset loss, because nature is an asset on which our economies, our livelihoods, and our well-being ultimately rely. Yet we are seriously mismanaging that asset globally to the extent that our demands on nature far exceed its capacity to supply on a sustainable basis. And the root of this problem is probably the greatest institutional failure we could ever see, with over-extraction, pollution, depleting stocks of natural capital in quality, in quantity, is affecting the abiotic environment, leading to what many believe could be, if we don't address it now, a major disaster. So by thinking about how we apply finance to recognize that our economies are embedded within nature, not external to it, we can take a different path where our engagements with nature are truly sustainable. A trade that cannot be financed tends to dry up. So trade finance and the supply of finance to products which assist those processes is crucial. In essence, nature needs to enter economic and finance decision-making in just the same way that energy, buildings, cars, machines, roads, and skills do. We need to find a way to incorporate nature into that discussion. So again, answering one of the questions, how will banks incorporate climate risks and green opportunities in their financial assessment? Well, green finance at its heart, like all finance, is about risk and reward. If we can identify a real risk because of climate change or biodiversity loss, there will be a way of measuring that risk. It may be an upside, it may be a downside. So the work that we and many others are doing now is learning to identify better the risks of both physical and transition risk. The Bank of England is strongly involved in this work, and I know the Bank of Slovenia is also a member of the NGFS, the Network for Greening the Financial System, which is doing great work. And clearly, much of the current attention is being given to the downside risk in carbon-intensive industries. But there is also a clear upside for companies that have already moved to reduce their carbon input and adjusted their business model for the new, as I discussed earlier. So in terms of green finance and green finance enabling this transition, the key here is the investor. Behind it all is the investor who wants to buy product that is labeled green. And that is why the drive is so exciting for any banker or any financier, or actually anybody who's incorporating risk into their business models. I think there's a lot to be done here, Barbara, and a great deal to discuss in the lead up to COP next year. So maybe we should move on to doing that. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Sir Roger Gifford. Climate change has also been an ongoing topic in Slovenia, especially with the COVID-19 stimulus packages. And this morning, it's my pleasure also to announce Mr. Andrej Šircelj, the Minister of Finance of the Republic of Slovenia, to tell us more about climate change and green finance and how it also fits in Slovenia's strategy. Good morning, Mr. Šircelj.
Ladies and gentlemen, guests, participants, good morning. Despite the current pandemic, we need to be aware that this is not the only crisis we are facing. The climate change crisis is affecting us as well, and its imminent impact is growing by the minute. We must focus on improving the course of climate change in the financial sector as well. We need improvements in sustainable finance in the context of global green growth initiatives. Slovenia is well prepared for these challenges. Our public finances are stable and the banking system maintained high liquidity. This is good because looking at the years to come, banks and other financial institutions will need to play an active role in the green economic recovery. Despite the current difficult situation, sustainable finance remains a priority for Slovenia. We are committed to advance the green transition because we are aware of its importance. Hence, we will strive toward reaching the net zero climate goals. We intend to do so by designing tax policy in a way that it will bring us closer to realizing the climate goals and boost the economic growth and green recovery at the same time. We will introduce targeted tax reliefs and other tax advantages to encourage green investments. Through financial and non-financial instruments, Slovenia will encourage the economic entities and individuals to prioritize environment and sustainability, and this will consequently increase environmental performance. SID Bank already became the first Slovenian issuer to issue a green bond in the amount of 75 million euros on the international capital market. Moreover, Slovenia has successfully prepared its green bond framework. The Slovenian green bonds, when issued, will be aligned with the green bond principles. They will enable the funding for existing and future green projects. Green finance should and will play an important role in the low carbon transition and greater environmental and social awareness. We need to offer suitable choice for investors and companies. We also need to inform them about the great impact green investments have on the environment and reducing climate risk. We will need to change, adapt, and improve the economic and overall environment due to the COVID-19 pandemic and its aftermath. I'm aware that the process of transition towards environmentally friendly economy will not happen overnight, and that it will require flexibility of all stakeholders. But we have to start somewhere, and we can consider emerging from the COVID crisis as a starting point for an accelerated transition towards a green and climate neutral future. I know that there is a lot of knowledge and even more power in sharing it. I believe that overcoming the climate change crisis by working together, sharing best practices, and helping each other constantly improving. Stay healthy and all the best.
Thank you very much, Mr. Šircelj. And now we will move to our tea with a special guest this morning. I hope you all have your tea or coffee with you. And our special guest is Mr. Blaž Brodnjak, the CEO of NLB Bank, one of the largest banks in the region. Good morning, Blaž.
Good morning, everyone.
Last November, we were in London, where NLB celebrated its first its first anniversary on the listing on the LSE. And
yes, that was a fabulous event.
Thank you. Times were quite different then. Who would have imagined that we were not able to do business travel at the moment, have a normal meal in a restaurant, who work from home. Things have changed a lot since last November when we were in London. So Blaž, how does your tea look like these days? How does your morning and your day look like these days?
It's still good old English green tea, so it didn't change a lot. It is just that, of course, it's in different circumstances. So I'm in the office, obviously. I find it a bit more suitable for myself personally to work actually from the office, but the building is empty, so I'm not meeting anyone. And of course, the whole day is then meetings online and just running from one to another, just, changing means of communication from Zoom to Teams to Skype to whatever. 5 channels I use on mobile phone as well, different ones. So it has become much more dynamic. One has to be much more disciplined, as Sir Gifford said at the beginning. There is no, friendly chat at the beginning of meetings. We are straight as Deus ex machina, just resolving, these big issues of today. So be it the COVID crisis, be it climate crisis, be it, of course, performance crisis. Since, of course, during lockdowns, everyone is suffering, economy is suffering, and of course the risks have been elevating throughout last half a year significantly. So it is much more difficult to understand where we actually are. But at the same time, now is the time to understand what an opportunity actually this crisis offers. And it goes from the environmental dimension, which clearly is a reset for all of us. I mean, we saw skies in India after a long time, right, in spring. And it seems possible to do it actually in quite short time frame, right? If we start working remotely, if we don't travel when it's not really needed, if we really start working on green initiatives when it comes to exhausts, when it comes to using the energy efficiently and effectively and so on. So I believe that this crisis has helped accelerating the topic of the climate change in a way that we understand, and we did understand actually through the spring wave, that healing is possible and could be quick as long as we transform the way how we actually produce the energy and how we produce goods effectively in a reasonable time frame. And I think there is no longer a choice actually. I mean, getting out of climate treaties, I mean, yes, okay, this might be an attempt of someone, but in long run it's unavoidable. You have to be part of the global treaties, global agreements, initiatives. I mean, we have one planet altogether, and we are globally dependent, and in this respect, it's clear. I mean, there is no alternative to it. Green is here to stay. Not only here to stay, it's going to be the actually, focus of everyone. And it's not only environmental. I see this revolution reset from COVID coming from from the other 2 elements of the ESG as well. So society and governance. green is common sense. We have to do it, otherwise the planet, is going to be corrupt to the extent it's going to be irreversible. And that's one thing. And when it comes to applying common sense in other two dimensions of ESG to the societal matters, offering equal chance, offering, meritocracy, common sense-based decisions, and then the governance, simply, leading towards common sense as well, not power games and positioning games, but really doing good for the society and the world we live in. I mean, there is no alternative to green, and I would use green also in societal and governance terms. To me, it's a reset.
You mentioned the environment, green, climate many times just now. NLB recently joined the UN Environment Program Finance Initiative, which speaks of responsible banking. How is NLB developing this initiative in practice in Slovenia and the region?
Well, it has various dimensions, and of course, it is the internal and the external. So how we actually live and function as a bank, how responsibly actually we do treat, consumption of paper, consumption of energy, or how we procure things, and then of course who you do business with, and this is suppliers landscape and clearly the borrowers landscape. So where you invest, and in this respect, we are of course promoting now new products which are actually really covering the efficient use of energy, and on the other hand renewables when it comes to the institutional investment. So we have been prominently participating in a couple of such energy projects in the region. Unfortunately, in Slovenia, there is too slow evolution in last period. I mean, we are talking about renewables for quite some time, but then when it comes to investments in hydropower plants, we have environmental issues for 20 years. And at the end of the day, Slovenia has quite a favorable mix actually of the energy production, since we are approximately 1/3 fossil, 1/3 hydro, and 1/3 nuclear. But when it comes to the other countries in the region, it is significantly different. So they are much more fossil dependent, especially if you look at Bosnia and Herzegovina and some other countries in the region. And here we have taken a conscious decision. We are not going to finance brown anymore. So you will not find us in financing coal mines or thermal power plants based on coal. So the other paradigm we are somehow shifting and now actually stressing is an investment into an enhancement, improvement of exhaust of the existing thermal power plant, then already disqualified, or is something we still might consider because it is improving the quality of life in the neighborhood at least, right? And at the end of the day, it's bringing some value interimistically, whereby we are of course clearly now very actively trying to identify projects in the region. Of course, wind projects are in Slovenia possible to the limited extent. Solar also, it's in the country's landscape, but in the region there might be significant potential clearly. I mean, both for wind and solar, and this is something we are now identifying. We are trying to bid, we are trying to be a part of this story. And when it comes to private individuals, we have just launched products that are carrying actually more favorable terms if this is a passive technology, so that the houses are using less energy and are efficient at that. So there is clear differentiation. As long as you as a private individual are investing into a new housing solution that is of course respecting these principles of green, you are getting more favorable terms. So that's active promotion. So the terms, the initiatives you sign, the treaties you sign are a bit more at storytelling and advocacy. But the action needs to follow, and in the coming years, our whole set of action is going to be directed in this way. This way. So internally, we will be a paperless company. So unless legally required, there will be no sheet of paper in this bank. For today, all the clients can sign any contract with our bank through the mobile app. They don't need to come to the branch to sign a paper, for example. They sign any contract with us through mobile app, as long as they have the mobile app. So we have to now encourage them to actually install the mobile app. But it's possible technically. So our main goal is no paper, which means, of course, environmentally friendly operations. No. On the other hand, when it comes to energy, we will be reducing our footprint, since we are enabling remote work, which means reducing travel, so less exhaust in traffic. But on the other hand, we will be shrinking our head office capacity significantly as well. So we will have our own carbon footprint, which will be significantly lower. And then, of course, as I said, actively seeking for promoting and supporting investments that have this green label.
Yeah, great, thank you. If you would allow me a personal question now. You're one of the first in Slovenia to have passed the Level 3 WSET award, which is the Wine and Spirit Education Trust, and indeed with honors. You also once said in an interview that if you ever leave the bank, you would settle in Halozé and make wine. Tell us more about this passion you have for winemaking.
That's not linked necessarily to green, but yes, we are running a bio estate as a family. We actually grow some and breed some Scottish Highland cattle, so there is link to United Kingdom as well here. On the other hand, climate change is affecting also the wine industry. So I'm not just a wine lover, a simple wine lover, and my family is cultivating 10,000 to 20,000 vines actually in Halozé since a couple of years. And I've been pruning the vineyard as I was 12, so I know all the works in the vineyard and in the cellar, and it's bringing joy. And on the other hand, the climate change is affecting also the wine industry heavily. So the varieties that have been traditionally thriving in our region, are now getting too high on alcohol levels and so on. So we might be growing Cabernet Sauvignon soon. But no, it's just a passion, and I believe that if you know the whole process, how many times you have to actually touch a single vine and talk to it practically to get good fruits, to be able to transform it into a divine drink, it just somehow is something different. And this is balancing me when I'm really overwhelmed with stress from business, some Saturday and Sunday, and usually I spend half of the weekends actually throughout the year in the vineyard physically, and that's the meditation.
Very interesting indeed. Thank you very much, Mr. Blaž Brodnjak. I see we already are getting some questions from the audience, and I encourage you to write your questions in the Q&A part. I will now ask Yuri Giacomelli to take over to start with the panel discussion and introduce all the panelists, and he will also be taking questions from the audience. Yuri, are you there?
Good morning, Barbara. Thank you very much. Good morning to everyone, and a warm welcome also from my side. Of course, particularly, I would like to greet Ambassador Sadler, Minister Šircelj, Sir Roger Gifford, with whom we were going to talk further to the panel. Allow me to say hello to Mr. Blaž Brodnjak, with whom I had the honor to work together some years ago in NLB, and to all our guests, and particularly to other panelists who are going to join in the debate right now, the debate on green finance, which is obviously coming at the best possible time in the days when we have been receiving some encouraging news related to vaccines that are several vaccines getting closer to the commercialization, which may definitely accelerate the end of this terrible pandemic. And we are also right now less than a year ago from the next climate summit, the COP26, which is going to be hosted by Glasgow. And it seems like the time is arrived for the green finance to take the mainstream. I would like to continue our debate with Sir Roger Gifford, with Blaž Brodnjak, whom you both have met. And I'd also like to introduce three other panelists that are going to join us now. Mr. Božo Černila, CEO of Trimo, definitely a front runner in sustainable innovation, seated in Trebnje in Slovenia. Mr. Nate Fruman, head of energy projects department at Geoplin, and Mr. Gregor Loik, the director of finance at Geni, both Geni and Geoplin being, of course, energy companies increasingly diversifying in their sourcing and in types of energy distribution and intermediation they are involved with. Welcome, everyone. Allow me to continue with, to discuss some of the green finance issues with Sir Roger Gifford first. Sir Roger, you've given us a very accurate introduction into the challenges ahead of us, and you related the need for green financing from various aspects, particularly from the one of financing innovation into renewables, and not only that. But could you? I mean, you've been on this trail for a very long time, and you've seen a lot. And how would you assess at this very moment and compare the level of awareness among different stakeholders across the world and their understanding of green finance? I mean, business audiences at large, but also particularly, in the banking industry. Then you also mentioned investors. Are capital markets ready, and how are they actually getting ready for that? And further to that, I'm particularly curious about how would you compare, the degree of understanding and readiness in different parts of, let's call it, the old Western world, the US, the UK, the European Union. How have you been monitoring this development?
Yeah, well, thanks, Yuri. You have to ask me one question at a time, or I'll forget the ones that I've just heard.
Yeah, I mean, the level of awareness. How do you see the awareness raising and taking over?
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. I think the reason I start with the investor is that the investor is key. And this whole market started back in 2008 because a bunch of Swedish investors said, we want to know what we're lending to, we want to know what we're buying, and we want to know that it's got a green cause underneath. So the only difference between green finance and other finance is that underlying cause, which is independently verified and established. So 5 years ago, when we really started this journey in London, we had a very active but small bond market, a green bond market, dominated by the World Bank, by the EBRD, by some major institutions, but very few banks and very few corporates there. And since that time, there's been an explosion of interest amongst many institutions issuing bonds because the investors want those bonds. And if you look at the amount of money that's now, the UNPRI is now saying that they have of investors who want to invest in ESG product, it's in the trillions and trillions. And we simply don't have enough product to fill that yet. So every new green issue that comes is already very popular because it's helping to fulfill that need that investors have for more green, attributable, environmentally labeled product, climate labeled product. So I think if you start with the investor every time, you then look at a different perspective in different countries, between the US, which is sophisticated, of course, Nordic area, which is very far down this curve. UK has not been so much, but is now much further down the curve than it was. And things like the announcement this morning by the Prime Minister, this is really significant for us because it's bringing the UK absolutely up to where other countries have been talking about in terms of the rhetoric around green. So UK investors will be much more actively looking at labeled green product going forward. And that's, I think, if you start with investors, you then understand why banks have come into this area. And banks have a slightly different perspective. Banks are saying, if there's a risk, if I can measure that risk, then I should be able to get some benefit from meeting the risk. So maybe I can apply slightly less capital to a less risky loan, which is how I normally do my lending. And if it's a less climate risk, because it's in a better technology or in a better space, or it's not going to be hit by carbon taxes in the future, or it's not going to be banned like auto stocks. Nobody thought of auto stocks as climate risk stocks until government started to ban diesel engines. So banks are saying, if I have a better sustainability loan here, a more sustainable loan or a greener loan, I will give you a better margin. I will give you a lower borrowing rate on that loan. Again, a variation on the theme of the investor, but driving in the same direction. And I think,
thank you very much.
This explosion of interest is driven both by risk and by reward, and behind it all is the investor driving that direction. As I say, I think the Nordics are well advanced in this area. EU is very well advanced with this taxonomy. UK, of course, less so in some other parts of the world, but it's coming fast, and you see it all over, Yuri.
You've said that it all started with some Swedish investors asking questions about the underlying cause and about wanting to know what they were investing in. So I would like to come back to the transparency issues later on, but let's try to remove one fallacy above all. You know, right now you've emphasized that there's a relationship between the risk and the reward. I'm sure that all the investors that are now flocking in to the green bond market and into other products are not doing that just because they would like to give away, or not at all because they would like to give away some of their yields, some of their future yields. It's something else. So I would like to, to go deeper into this, because maybe there's still, some conviction that, yeah, we have to do it because we have to do it. And it's quite obvious that we have to resolve the climate issue. But it is also a sea of opportunities, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's the other way around. Let's forget climate.
Yes.
For one moment, let's forget it.
A good one. Yeah.
The technologies are better than fossil fuel technologies. That's why people are very keen on wind farms and on solar and on hydrogen, because they know it's going to be cheaper and better from a commercial point of view. It also happens to be much better from a climate point of view. So it's not that climate isn't important. Climate is very important. But when it comes to looking at the motivation of the investor, they are never looking for a lower return. They're never looking for a worse credit risk. No bank ever wants a worse credit risk. And indeed, they have duties to their shareholders, they have duties to their pension fund managers, to their fiduciary agents, not to take a lower yield. So I think the argument against yield and pricing, green finance, again, is like any other finance, no reduction of yield, no reduction of credit quality. But you have the underlying purpose, which you believe is you want to have, because you believe it's a good thing to have. You also believe you're in the right space when it comes to risk management.
So a number of technologies are coming out of the incubation stage and are getting into the disruption stage, you're actually saying. So the opportunities are huge, and we have the means to combat the climate change with that. And the green finance is reconnecting all the ends again. Is it you like to distinguish between greening finance and financing green? I mean, both ends are connected, but could you try to
Yes.
maybe elaborate on why these two things have to be treated autonomously? Because I
Yes.
mean, one thing
think
is
this
how investors are related to their opportunities, and then there are opportunities
Yes.
themselves, right?
This was a key part of the government's, so UK government's green finance strategy just 2 years ago, distinguishing between financing green and greening finance. So financing green is about financing projects, moving capital into green projects, which is what we're talking about in the green bond market, in the green loan, the sustainable bond market, and many other colors that we now have. We now have blue bonds, we have red bonds, we have pink bonds. It's about labeled product, which is doing a purpose that it says underneath the bond. But let's stick with green bonds for the moment. So the greening of finance is about the financing of green, financing of green projects is very much what banks and investors are interested in. The greening of finance is about defining what green really means, and that's where the Bank of England and the Bank of Slovenia and the Network for Greening the Financial Services have been very active in. What does green mean? Where are the limits? What is really green and what is half green? What is semi-green? And we come into this big discussion around transition, about working with the oil companies to make change, not working against the oil companies to make change, because this whole discussion of what is really carbon reducing, what is really climate beneficial is important. It's particularly important when we come into biodiversity. What are good foods? What are bad foods? By changing our buying practices of foods, how much are we harming overseas economies? How much are we benefiting them? And that whole discussion. So the discussion around the greening of finance is one that's being taken by the authorities, and very important for giving investors clarity, for giving banks clarity, so that they know that what they're borrowing, what they're lending to, or what they're investing in really has the right result at the end of it. And that's why we've distinguished between the two. We have established a Green Finance Institute in the UK to look at the financing of green, mobilizing capital into good projects. And the Bank of England is taking a real lead on the greening of finance, the discussion of that, which the EU has also been terrific in. And we intend to work very closely with the EU on that taxonomy.
In fact, there's a field of cooperation we are all looking forward to. And thank you very much, Mr. Roger Gifford. Allow me to pass on to Blaž Brodnjak. First of all, I would like to congratulate myself for being among the first in the world, actually less than 200 banking institutions have signed the UN principles of responsible banking so far, but NLB is the first such group in the region. And Blaž, allow me, I mean, knowing you, I know that it's not just about the narrative. I would like to understand a little bit better how this commitment actually is distributed among the banks in the NLB group. You mentioned before in your introductory address, there are different situations in different markets where NLB group is present. And I am certainly sure that there has been some action in the pipeline, or even in action already at the bank right now. How is this commitment turning into products and services at NLB?
Well, this is in principle a group-wide initiative. So NLB has joined these principles as actually the group. And we have also signed some other commitments, such as MIGA instruments, for example. And of course, one of our stakeholders clearly is also EBRD. And there are other investors that are heavily interested in the entire ESG agenda. And we see ever more interest actually in discussing these topics. And some global investors clearly are even not willing to invest anymore in businesses without such an agenda very strongly in the forefront of our, everyday life. So we are doing this actually as the whole group. As said, we are identifying eventual investment opportunities actually into this territory group-wide. So we have just participated in a wind park investment, for example, in Kosovo. And of course, we are exploring some solar opportunities and wind opportunities in North Macedonia, for example. Unfortunately, there are not many projects in Slovenia, so they are more or less reduced to corporate projects in, some refurbishments of production facilities and, some new installations where you, of course, are working on energy efficient solutions and eventual recuperations and, co-generations and so on. This is something that is happening and on a limited scale. On the other hand, it is for me very important to mention that I see this as transformational as a whole institution as well, also from the inside environment and perspective. Yes. So this change doesn't start with taxonomy. This change doesn't start with, agreeing on, the terminology, what green means. This change starts with sincere, authentic belief that we as individuals should and can contribute to a better planet, to a better world and quality of life. And it starts, with how I personally, am using energy and, treating waste and producing waste and so on and so on. So for me, it's an advocacy also internally, and paperless is just, one of such options. The other thing is really then, using the energy wisely and smartly, or procuring things smartly, really traveling on also, these are all personal individual decisions. This is not imposed on you by the system, by the bond issuance, by the government, by the PPP project, right? I mean, we collectively, all these 7.5 billion of people have to start, living simply differently to the extent possible, right? And this is for us also a kind of a movement which we would like to be a part of and which we would like to stimulate and advocate, not only in this part of the world, but of course in this part of the world we have some influence. The systemic institution, after the acquisition of Komercijalna banka, which is pending and supposed to close this year, we will hold top 3 position in 6 countries as a financial institution, and this is a meaningful position, right? We are the ones people look up to, people actually listen and somehow are expecting also that from you to be a driver of such change. And in this respect, this is now getting more and more deeply embedded. we are in a bit of a specific situation as a company, because in this region, banks are extremely liquid. So we are talking about loan to deposit ratios of low 60s, right? So us issuing further financial instruments for our own funding needs would really be just labeling things. We don't need this money. We are full of liquidity. So we are eagerly trying to explore opportunities to place this money into a meaningful project, of which clearly the green has a priority, and of which renewable, of which sustainable have priority. And unfortunately, we don't recognize yet that many, but there are more and more, and we want to be one of the key drivers of this change in this society.
It's definitely a leadership position in the region, but allow me to pick up on this recognition that there may not be so many projects readily available. I've got two follow-up questions to that. First, I mean, how can we enable clients? And secondly, are right now banks ready? Do banks evaluate risks properly at this very time, or may they be punishing some of the innovators because the risk management has not adjusted, or the risk models have not adjusted fully to the new world? How do you see this transition? Yeah, I believe it's learning by doing. It's not, turning the sock, but it's certainly an important testimony that I would like to have from you as an insider.
Yeah,
Privileged insider.
It's a bit tricky territory in a sense, that something that is green is per se, the best, not necessarily. So
yeah,
when it comes to commercial lending, and we are commercial banks, clearly, cash flow is still a king. So we are actually, lenders that actually define and take our decisions based on the underlying cash flows of projects, right? And any undertaking, frankly. So what we are interested in is understanding really the fundamentals, and these fundamentals have to be at the level that cash flows are there for regular repayments, right? Otherwise, it cannot be sponsored by commercial banks. Otherwise, there might be some other funds available for supporting venture ideas, and some innovation ideas and startup ideas and technologies. I believe the technologies are now here. It's more or less how you apply and to what extent you actually put it into the as we say in Slovenia and in this region, how to install it into the territory, into the areas, into the concrete opportunities. And here we are seeing really big inefficiency in the system. So it takes us 20 years or 30 years even to actually be able to start even putting the first shovel into the ground for the hydropower plant, for example. It takes us 20 and more years for comparable other projects. And now we are building the second railway track for 35 years, and the idea is that we move of course cargo from the streets and lorries and trucks to the trains, but we take so much time, and the system is so highly inefficient. And I'm saying that because this is a small country, and this is a bunch of small fragmented markets where the project sizes are smaller, right? There are only a couple of them that have a size that is in the range of 100 million to 1 billion in the whole region. And these are the meaningful ones that are making difference really overnight once they are put in production. The many smaller ones, of course, are also very attractive for us, and that's why we are going into the PI segment, the SME segment as well. But they are really only marginally contributing, because the average size Slovenian company is in international terms small SME.
So it's very important to keep the awareness on the fact that it's a systemic change, and the regulatory shift has to be diligent and complete in order to enable new projects actually to become bankable. Thank you very much, Blaž Brodnjak. Blaž Brodnjak is also the chairman of the supervisory board of the Slovenian Bank Association, and we will continue to explore this question with him. But allow me to go further to the front runners, to the innovators. Mr. Božo Černila, the CEO of Trimo, is here with us. I would like to explore with you, Mr. Černila, your experience. Trimo has been an innovator in building materials, in prefabricated building and construction products for decades. And I would like to know how the green agenda has been influencing your innovation portfolio and your innovation activity overall, and how does this translate in your product portfolio? You definitely have got something to offer there. Please, Mr. Černila.
Yes, look, what we are looking and how we are, the mindset which we have in Trimo is basically future is now. I will explain why is that, because when some of the investor in different types of industry is building a facility with our products, then we need to understand that this building is going to last for 40, 50 years. And many things are changing in between, even those milestones which are set 2030, 2050, we are going beyond that with our buildings. Therefore, it's vitally important from our side that we do properly understanding the trends and also address them well. And here is not just the topic of energy efficiency, which goes both direction with changing economic environment, I will explain, but it is for us vitally important that, you know, our products are green, non-toxic, durable, and most of all, highly recyclable. Because we do divide, when we assess the product sustainability, basically in two phases, the pre-customer phase and post-customer phase. So we are not just focused into the meeting certain product property demands, but we go wider. And, you know, particularly when we are talking in the energy efficiency, there are many projects, buildings, like, for example, commercial, when they want to have high isolative properties that they are keeping energy inside of the building. Yeah? But we are facing recently a big expansion of digital industry, which requires a lot of erections of data centers all around the globe, and we are supplying those data centers. And here demand to protect energy inside is not existing. They need energy to cool down those servers. So you have, my point is that our innovative principles are to understand very well the client needs. And as it was said earlier in the debate, we have been serving many projects in Sweden when the, let's say, sensitivity regarding how our products are produced. So very much important for the investor, how green is our production process. And then, so it go beyond where the raw materials are supplied, as well as, of course, the product properties which they will use in their building. So yeah, you assemble all those parameters into the company, and yeah, basic most important parameter out of those mentioned is also company culture, because what we want to achieve is that all employees are treating sustainability with the same care, like when we are taking care about our costs, when we are taking care about our safety, and so on. Yeah.
So you are re-examining your purpose in a way, and you mentioned before that it's not just about you know, the installing the product or the completing a building, if I may be a little bit you know, simplifying. It's also about the recyclability of your products. And is there an increasing need for the take back, for the let's say the extended producer liability in your particular case? And how do you see this evolving across different markets? Because you must be present in more than 50 markets around the world, from Norway to Middle East, Slovenia, the whole Europe, and so forth. How do you see this extended product liability, and how can this influence your business model in the future?
This we are facing more and more, yeah. But there are tremendous differences in between developed markets and some emerging markets, yeah, when this need is not existing. But what we like is that our clients, the investors who are investing with our materials, do have this awareness, because we are setting up the systems together with our suppliers to be able to collect those materials or used products back in the production cycle. I need to say here that our products, we did achieve that our products are 99% recyclable. And with that, you know, this is, we simply say we have a sentence. When we are generating in the production process waste, that is a failure. Eh? So we didn't do well something.
Very well, yeah.
And that's why, you know, now in Europe, this, let's say, need to be able to collect the materials, products which are not in use back to the production cycle are increasing, and they are increasing fast, which is very good.
So definitely buyers are asking these questions, and are required to answer these questions. Do also banks and investors, I mean, you deal with commercial banks, of course, and do also commercial banks ask these questions when dealing with you?
Look, commercial banks in this particular case, we don't have this contact, but we have, let's say, a contact via the investors, because many of those investments into the buildings are financed with green financing tools, and simply there are a list of requirements which we as a supplier need to fulfill. And here I need to explain also that, you know, we see that as a very, very good opportunity for us, because we are already set up in the way that we are able to fulfill those demands. And we are certified with all those certificates who are proving that we are doing everything right. And let's say those investors who do have high level of environmental consciousness and culture, they do require those certificates, and for us it's clearly a competitive advantage, and this is positive. So what we feel is green economy with green financing, it is beneficiary for companies like us.
So if I understand right, you will not have to overhaul your business model, but you are going to reinforce your business model even further by being on the right track. Thank you very much, Mr. Černila. For now, I'm moving to our two
You're on mute.
Can you please unmute yourself?
Oh, was I muted? Apologies. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Very well. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Černila. I hope, I believe you're not overhauling your business model. You are actually reinforcing your business model. It was a very good illustration. Thank you. And to Mr. Nate Fruman, Head of Energy Projects Department, I would like to ask, how do you witness the shift towards renewable energy sources happening, and how does this influence your current business model? You are traditionally a natural gas company, but you see yourselves, I believe, a little bit differently in the future. What is happening, please?
Yeah, thank you, Yuri. Yeah, actually, in Geoplin, which is the leading Slovenian natural gas supplier, we actually believe that the renewables are playing every day a bigger role. So for the clients from energy-intensive industries and service sector, such as steel industry or chemical industry. Renewables are important for keeping their market position competitive. So their end users actually are nowadays well aware of what sustainability means. So the whole supply chain has to adopt and actually deliver answer to that demand, which I personally believe is the right direction. And concerning our current business, which is traditionally natural gas supply, I can say that in the last year, or better said, year and a half, we have received more and more demands for decarbonized natural gas supply from our clients. So at the beginning, mainly bigger companies, international corporations with production sites in Slovenia, but later and now also SMEs and smaller privately owned companies which are supplying to bigger corporations, usually in automotive industry. So I would say that market has clearly shown that its demand for renewables and decarb energy sources, so it's now on us to deliver a solution. Yeah.
Where do you see the solution, and how do you see your company, let's say, 10 years down the road?
Yeah, for sure. As a Geoplin, as a leading company in the natural gas supply in Slovenia, we have to adapt our business model. So based on our delivery, which is over 80% of natural gas consumed in Slovenia, and also quite large amounts of natural gas delivered abroad. Yes. We found a new, let's say, a new business model. So, for example, if the client needs decarbonized natural gas, which is one of the so-called green energy sources, we have to respond that demand, and that is exactly what we are doing right now. Currently, I'm leading a project where the mixture of natural gas and hydrogen, or so-called decarbonized natural gas, will be supplied to the client in steel industry. So there is a problem since European regulation does not currently allow to supply hydrogen and natural gas mixture through transmission piping system. So we are going to produce hydrogen locally where it is needed directly on production site. And ourselves, and especially our client, unfortunately, don't have time to wait for EU legislative to be adopted because the competition from EU, especially Scandinavian companies from steel industry, are already working on such projects, and they have set goals for complete carbon-free steel production till end of 2025.
Thank you. Thank you. A very good illustration. Thank you very much, Mr. Fruman. Another one that shows how important it is to tackle the change systemically. So all ends have to meet. The company transformation, the regulatory framework, the financing, and I wish you good luck with that. I think it's very indicative, the experience that you've shared. And allow me to move on to Mr. Gregor Loik, Director of Finance at Geni. You've been one of the innovators in your field. You are becoming a energy source agnostic, if I may use this term. Traditionally a wholesaler and retailer of energy, of electricity, apologies. I would like to ask you, Mr. Loic, could you, first of all, could you a little bit describe how you have been transiting away from purely energy transmission and then intermediation to other energy sources, and how has this transformation being developed at your company, please?
Good morning from my side. Good morning to all participants. Thank you for having me.
And we don't hear you very well. If you could be so kind and speak closer to the microphone, please.
Okay. Yeah. I hope it's better.
The closer, the better.
Thank you for having me. Yes, JNI is one of the fastest growing, most progressive, innovative player on energy markets. But as you said, the core two pillars that we started was dealing with electricity and gas on the wholesale market and supplying electricity and gas to end customers. But many years back, we realized that, of course, that energy sector is one of the major problems in this green sustainable world, and we didn't want to be just part of the problem, we want to be the part of the solution. So in addition to these two core pillars, so trading and supply, we have established a third pillar predominantly through Geni Sonce or JNI Sun that offers energy services solutions, where as a team of leading experts in the field of energy, we see our mission in the provision of innovative products and services that will allow our customers to achieve increased self-sufficient supply, more efficient energy consumption, smart energy management, and thus the reduction of their own carbon footprint. So we see that JNI must be a promoter of this green transformation, and that we cannot just leave our clients on their own for this transformation, and we need to offer them solutions.
So if you allow me, your focus is actually on helping your clients carry out their energy transformations, right? That's the focus you have undertaken in your current business model.
For sure, but okay, we started with ourselves. You cannot go and just tell others what to do. So we started with ourselves. We electrified our car fleet. We have our office is self-sufficient. We have a solar plant on our roof. So you need to start with yourself. But yes, in just say the last couple of years, what we did is to have our clients in last year, we were focusing on micro solar power plants to households. But in last year, we were also first in Slovenia to start up a solar power plant on an apartment building, and we set up the first B2B solar power plant on the roof of a business customer. We were also involved in e-mobility, so we didn't miss this e-mobility, and we helped, let's say, we offer a solution that helps clients with electric car charging, using this charging infrastructure more easily. So yeah, these are solutions that are helping clients go through this green transformation. What we do on our own is that already at the moment we have in the pipeline, we are building in North Macedonia a solar power plant of 17 megawatts. So we will be also, or we will start to produce our own green energy as well. Besides, from till now, we were just the biggest buyer of renewable energy from clients. So we have a total of 182 hydroelectric power plants and more than 1,000 solar power plants that we are buying electricity from them. So yes, this is a short version of the transition and the business model that we are having now.
Yes. And how are you seen by the financial institutions? How are you seen by banks, let's say concretely? Do they ask you about your business model transformations?
Okay, it's a good question. I don't have anything, to let's say, the banks are not supporting us. I think that many times before was said that investors are very important and they are the drivers, and we just need to show them the good projects. And yes, in Slovenia especially, there are small projects, as it was said. But Jane and I, let's say that we are innovative also on this side. We were the first one to issue a green bond, so we are still the only company in Slovenia that will issue a green bond. For that, we got a recognition in London 2 years ago. So this is something that just showed that okay, you can rely on banks for smaller projects, but you can do it on your own. If you have a good project, you will find an investor for sure. At least from my side, investors, when they see our projects, to be honest, they stay in the queue. So they are offering money if they can participate. So I don't see at the moment that the problem would be on the financing side. It's just the way if you finance it with the banks or you issue your own green bond, which it's recommended from my side, or you go to the bank. So green financing is booming at the moment.
Very, very well. Thank you very much. Good testimony of what Sir Roger Gifford exposed at the beginning. Yes, right now it's becoming the mainstream, and it's not a niche market anymore. Definitely, the green finance is becoming the main topic. Sir Roger Gifford, please, we are rather limited in time, but I would like to explore a little deeper, the question of transparency, and I would like to inquire a little bit more in this, task force on climate-related disclosures. What has been changing on this platform, and also what has been the contribution of this task force?
So I think it's worth noting that last week, our Chancellor of the UK, Rishi Sunak, announced that the climate disclosure will become mandatory for UK corporates and financial institutions from 2025. And that really behind this is the idea that climate is affecting everything we do, and we need to take into account what that does to our businesses. Yes, it's on renewable energy, but it's also on things like political decisions around diesel engines. As I said earlier, shipping, trucking, logistics, cars are really set to go through a fundamental change. So if we don't take account of that as banks and institutions, and if our corporates, our companies we're lending to, don't take account of it, then we don't know the full picture, so we don't know the full risk. So the task force on climate-related financial disclosure is really about bringing the understanding of that risk into the boardroom. So the board sits there and says, we have this risk, how are we going to handle it? Or let's say we introduce a carbon tax, a much greater carbon tax, which is a logical thing to do, very difficult politically, very difficult. But say we introduce a $75 carbon tax, how would that affect many companies? It could be devastating for some, it could be very beneficial for others. But understanding the nature of that risk is something that we ought to have in the boardrooms of companies. We ought to know where we stand on that. So TCFD is about trying to bring this forward into the boardroom. It's about making companies account for it and think about the direction of travel, politically and climate-wise, and again, back to the investors, what the investors want to see. And investors have been calling for this very strongly for TCFD. They are delighted, I think, by the announcement that this will be mandatory in the UK. And I think we will begin to see more and more discussion around what it means to be green and climate friendly going forwards. TCFD will achieve that.
Yeah, very well, very well. Moving to Mr. Blaž Brodnjak, how do you see the Slovenian banking industry versus the green finance topic? Do you see an opportunity for everyone? Are we doing enough to embrace this opportunity and equip ourselves so that we could be innovators and not laggards? I'm also referring to one of the questions that was in the chat, and thank you to everybody. I will get to that as well. Please, Mr. Brodnjak.
Well, on the level of the banking industry and bank association, we are actually really working on defining certain principles of responsible banking when it comes to the green agenda. Of course, we have signed the UN's initiative, but on the other hand, also on the banking industry level here in Slovenia, we are talking about this now very, very intensively. And in the coming months, we plan to put together these principles in a way that it's going to be also clearer, what kind of underwriting criteria and principles are put in place in order to actually promote, advocate, but also reward, right? So it's a positive stimulation in this respect put in place. That is to be somehow seen in combination with a punitive part on the other hand, which is of course charging and taxing the carbon footprint of the higher volumes and so on. So it is a set of measures. I would just reiterate, this transformation is not possible overnight, and we are talking about transformation. As long as such high portion of energy is still produced through fossil, and the more you accelerate electric mobility, the more energy you need, the more electricity you need, clearly, and this is really a paradigm change that is not possible to address overnight. There was a question, why have we financed, for example, in 2019, it was only a couple of million, but financed, the improvement, enhancement of the filter system of the thermal power plant in Tuzla, where we were invested in this power plant already. We bought a bank that was headquartered in Tuzla with 60% market share in this region, this canton, right? And we are interested seriously and authentically in the quality of life of our people, right? Even including our employees and families. And this was an investment in the improvement of the quality of air. Was this a justifiable investment? I mean, I'm posing this question very seriously. On the other hand, we nevertheless decided that this was our last investment in coal. So no longer coal investments exist in NLB, and the total exposure into the coal, be it coal mines or thermal power plants of the whole NLB group, is single-digit millions. So we are not a problem of this world when it comes to finance industry, right? You would see Western banks with tens of billions of exposures in brown, right? And for them, this transition and transformation is much more challenging in terms of their performance. For us, it's actually not that important. But generally, as said, the banks are working now on a framework that would more clearly define the rules of the game, but coming from the positive stimulus on one side, promoting, of course, green, but on the other hand, clearly understanding the element of the brown, and eventually, of course, gradually go out of supporting such projects. But it is not possible to, simply withdraw financing support from the entire brown universe. Then the world collapses.
There are some questions for you in the chat. I would suggest to skip the one related to the Scottish cattle that your family is breeding, unless you strongly feel about answering that one. But I wouldn't like to go off topic. There is one on the paperless business conduct that you mentioned before, that you're going paperless. And how do you see this transition, and how about the jobs being lost on this? I think you have, extensively explained yourself already, but would you like to give a further comment on that? I don't want to leave questions unanswered.
Well, lots of jobs is not really happening if we see the unemployment rate in Slovenia, right? Of course, COVID related, but there is an increase. But pre-COVID, everyone was crying for talent. For 3 years, everyone in Slovenia was crying for talent, and we were thinking of how we would import potentially, labor from the market far east. So Balkans basin was practically full, empty, right? So this is not really happening with the digital transformation. The jobs are not simply wiped out. The jobs are different. Profiles are changing. When it comes to paperless, everyone is already now kindly invited, to use our mobile apps, and then anything with us can be done paperless, anything.
Yeah, thank you. I think we have also substantially covered the question from Nina Valentic about how you evaluate the projects, and we are going to answer some other questions. I will pass the word back to Sir Roger Gifford, but before doing that, and I would like to go a little bit into COP as well, COP26. I would like to ask our innovators, our front runners here, Mr. Černila, Mr. Loik, and Mr. Fruman, about what would their recommendations be to banking regulators and to regulators at large in order to facilitate and accelerate the green transition.
My opinion is that it's not only about the banks, I think it's we need to understand generally it's about the banks, it's about investors, it's about the end consumer, and so it's about whole supply chain, and we need to work on the culture of this change. It is on the bank if they make a decision not to finance projects which are not environmental friendly, but at the same time, bank cannot invest projects which are green if they are not existing. So it's on us, it's on all of us. And, to push it all toward the banks, it would be too simple for this challenge which is ahead of us. So we need to generate, bring ideas for the green future in all segments. We are talking green mobility, we are talking green buildings, we are talking zero energy housing. So there are many, many initiatives. So we need to bring projects toward the banks, and with this, what we heard today, I think that banks are more than willing to support those kind of projects. And on the other hand, where banks can help not to finance projects which are not environmental friendly.
Very well, very well. So let's bring more green projects to the banks. Mr. Fruman.
Yeah, I would also agree with Mr. Černila, and yeah, I would like to add on that the policymakers should actually enable conditions for all relevant stakeholders in the field to start developing real projects which will be compliant with our national environmental plan, which was finally confirmed this year. So, as heard before, waiting for a building permit for 10 years, for example, for one wind farm or hydro micro power plant is simply too long. And yeah, that would be my suggestion or comment.
Thank you very much. That would be 1/3 of the entire disruption period exposed before by Sir Roger Gifford of any new technology, right? Mr. Loik?
Yes. Of course, policymakers are crucial, but as everybody said, they are not the only one in this transition. But nevertheless, I like to see this EU taxonomy regulation, the new green bond principle, because this helps me to see what's a green project and what is just greenwashing. So it's much easier for me to step to or to go to the investors and to be transparent. So this, let's say, negotiations between investors and developers or JNI is much easier. But policymakers, yes, they just need to have, or they need to enable us to work in the environment with regulations that are not, with too many let's say,
obstacles.
Obstacles, yes, and let us, do what we do best, and that's it.
Very well, very well. So an emphasis on transparency is definitely a good one. Thank you, Mr. Loik. Now, I would like to also ask a final question to Sir Roger Gifford. In less than 12 months, the world will be gathering at Glasgow. We have seen a tremendous effort in the previous stages of the making of the global, let's say, climate governance. What can we expect to that? And there's also, I mean, it's the UK hosting the summit together with Italy. Italy is taking over a particularly important stakeholder group, which is young people. And there was also a question in the chat related to the young, how we can bring them in green financing and into the story in general. So what can we expect from Glasgow? Sir Roger Gifford, please.
The quick answer is everything, because there are so many parties will be there with agendas around private finance and around the role of the development banks. For me, the COP has this great opportunity to reset our thinking about how we are taking forward, particularly energy and particularly in developing countries. And I think one of the biggest discussions we will have between now and then is how the public and private finance work together to make this happen. Private finance has to, as we discussed earlier, has to have the right return, the right credit, the right creditor criteria around their investments, around their lending. And the bankers on this panel, I'm surely will agree that you can't ask a bank to make a loss-making loan or a loan that's going to reduce their credit quality. What we can do is work with the big public institutions, the development banks and the multi-development banks, to provide that finance in countries where they desperately need new energy and where the only alternative at the moment for some of them is fossil fuels. So that, I think COP is a great opportunity to have that conversation and to reset the role of public and private finance together in making the transition happen properly. There will then be 20 other, 30 other great ambitions coming up. The UK will certainly have a very strong agenda around what it wants to achieve there, not only the transformation in the United Kingdom, but its role with Europe and its role with the European standards and with the financial markets generally. But for me, the big conversation is that public-private one.
Thank you very much. Indeed, this is an overwhelming topic, and I'm sure nobody would mind, spending an hour discussing it. However, we are limited in time, and our time has run out. At this point, I would like to thank enormously to Sir Roger Gifford for all his enlightening insights. It was really a pleasure talking to you, Sir Roger, and thank you to Blaž Brodnjak, thank you to Božo Černila, thank you to Gregor Loik, and many thanks to Nate Fruman for sharing hands-on experience from your respective businesses and industries as well. This has been very enlightening, very helpful, and I believe also you will all agree, also quite optimistic. And what we need right now is quite some optimism and awareness that we are all working towards understanding and sharing a wider purpose. Having said that, and I would also like to thank to the audience, of course. You have not been heard, but you've been very active, and I was trying to bring your questions in. Nevertheless, the panelists were quite exhaustive and complete, so I hope at least the most of them have been answered. All that rest to do is to really to get to the conclusive remarks, and in order to do so, I would like to pass the word to Her Excellency Ms. Tiffany Sadler, the British ambassador to Slovenia. Thank you very much to all. Ambassador Sadler, please.
Thank you. And thank you, Yuri, for fielding all those questions and for bringing in all the panelists so brilliantly as you did. Look, just a couple of things from me. I came in today with a sense of the challenge on the green finance front. Collectively, globally, we need to raise $90 trillion by 2030 to address climate change. Those are the figures that are out there. They are quite big. They are quite scary. Can we raise that collectively? Can we raise that globally? Well, look, on the basis of this morning's discussion, I go away personally absolutely convinced that we can. And I don't think it's that complicated. It's all the things that panelists have spoken about bringing the green agenda into every single finance decision that is made. So I go away absolutely positive about that. And this is not, as so many of the panelists have said, because people want to be nice. This is because the future is coming, and as our Prime Minister in the UK has said, that is a future where you wake up in a house that is warmed with green energy. You make your cup of tea, whether it's green tea or whether it's black tea, you make your cup of tea perhaps using a source of that is powered by hydrogen. You get into your zero emissions vehicle, or you use zero emissions public transport to go to work. So that's the future. When we start to build that future into every single financial decision that's made, we raise that 90 trillion. So I go away absolutely inspired, as you have said, Yuri, and absolutely positive about the future. Thank you to all our panelists. Thank you to Yuri, thank you to Barbara, and thank you for making this event so special and so positive and so fascinating. We have ranged from Scottish Highland cattle to vineyards, to solar panels on roofs in Slovenia, to boardrooms. So we've covered a huge range. So thank you. And if I may, I just want to put in a short plug for our Future Perfect series. We will be doing another Future Perfect event in the new year. We'll probably be moving on to topics around security or those sorts of issues, but I won't. I will save the title of our next Future Perfect event until the new year. So thank you, and thank you, as I say, for making it such a positive and fascinating morning.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Barbara, it's back to you for the final word, I believe.
Thank you to all the panelists, Yuri, Sir Roger Gifford, who came in from the UK, Madam Ambassador, and for everyone to have joined us. Let me invite you to our next event, which will be on cybersecurity on the 11th of December. And wish you all the best. Stay safe, stay healthy, and stay well. Bye-bye.